Happy Easter, all my viewers. Uh, Kicking off, Walt Presents with the original classic, Snow White, the Seven Dwarfs. So to go into some background, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that I will be referring to this notebook where I've been taking tons of notes, looking from documentaries, bits of Wikipedia. There's so much information out there on Snow White. It was incredible, all the things I had learned. So Walt wanted to film originally Alice in Wonderland with Mary Pickford. It would be a hybrid animation and live action film. But Paramount got the rights and they couldn't do it. So then he decided, okay, can't do that. Let's do Rip Van Winkle. Paramount also had the rights and knocked him out of that one. Babes in Toyland was next on the agenda. And they couldn't do that because Hal Roach Studios had it and they made a film with Laurel and Hardy. So he thought back to his childhood about seeing a movie called Snow White. About 1917 is when he saw it. It said, and to quote him, he said he thought it was a perfect story. It had a sympathetic dwarves and things. It had a prince and a girl, the romance, a heavy. I just thought it was a perfect story. So that became where he would go in that direction. Guided by the view of a master storyteller, 32 animators, 1,032 assistants, 107 in-betweeners, 10 layout artists, 25 background artists, 65 special effects animators, and 158 inkers and painters, and countless production staff. It came together to create the masterpiece that we know as Snow White today. So in June 1934, the production began with an estimated budget of $250,000, which was 10,000 times, 10 times the average production budget of a Silly Symphony cartoon. It would be the very first full-length cell animated feature in motion picture history. Both Roy Disney and his wife tried to talk him out of it. Hollywood laughed at him, calling him it was Disney's folly. But he wouldn't hear of it. He wanted to get this done. Eventually, the production cost of having such a large staff ended up catching up with him. And from a $250,000 picture, it raised to a $1.4 million picture. Keep in mind, this is 1934. It's a lot of money, a lot of chump change there. So he ended up having to go to a bank to get a loan to do it. He needed a mortgage in his house, but he needed something. Someone talked him into bring something to show the bank. So he screened what he had shown, they had already animated and filmed, and it was that right there is where he got the money to finish the film. The main attraction, he said, had to be the Seven Dwarfs. The original story, they had no names or personalities. From about 50 names, they came up with Doc, Grumpy, Bashful, Sleepy, and Happy, and eventually Sneezy and Dopey got their names later on. But the other 5 were the original names. One time they were called Jumpy, and another name that slips my mind. Models were used to help draw the human figures, and the creator of Betty Boop actually came up with all the female designs. His name is Grim Natwick. The music is well-known songs. You've got Hi Ho, Someday My Prince Will Come, and Whistle While You Work. Now here's an interesting thing, is Disney, although he didn't have the money for the song, so he had to go through a public company to do it. So to this day, they do not own the rights to a lot of songs from a lot of their films. But this particular film, he owns no songs from it. It's also the very first film to have a soundtrack. Snow White, it premiered at the Carthage Circle Theater on 12/21 of 1937. Stars in attendance included Judy Garland. This was for RKO, who he released it through. It was a box office success, making $4.2 million. It's the highest grossing film of all time, So Gone with the Wind knocked it out. Actually, this is the film that knocked Birth of a Nation off the top of the list. Internationally, it grossed 8 million. Due to its success, it was re-released multiple times in 1952, 58, 67, 75, 83, and 87, and 93. It was also the very first film to be scanned in digital in 1993. In fact, it was scanned in 4K resolution, so that technology has been around for quite some time. Continued fallout from the success at the 11th Academy Awards. Walt was actually nominated with an honorary award, which was a standard like gold statue, but attached to it was Oscar, and there was 7 little gold Oscars with it. And I've seen pictures of this. It's really, really cool seeing that. The song "Someday My Prince Will Come" was actually Oscar nominated, but it didn't win. So much success had led Disney to actually build his studios in Burbank, California, where it still stands and used to this day. To this day, he's making many films for great generations. Snow White's a fun movie. I mean, it's a really enjoyable film. Complaints today about it is the animation on the humans does not hold up very well. Watching it, yeah, I could see it. I mean, if you look at the dwarves and the animals, it's a whole different feel. They've never really drawn humans before. They'd always drawn animals or creatures or things like this. So this was something new, bringing in those models, trying to get that animation where it needed to be was a challenge for all these guys. Most of the cartoonists that worked on this were newspaper cartoonists. So it was a huge undertaking to try to make the very first animated feature. But it's a classic. I think it holds up incredibly well. The songs are great. The dwarves are very memorable. I mean, there's so much merchandise that's been released over the years. Interesting enough, though, it's kind of a victim of its own success. When this became a success, and like I saw a quote from Walt Disney that about Pinocchio, which they didn't think Pinocchio was as good as Snow White. So he got to the point where he almost hated the film because just like they kept comparing it to it. But me personally, I prefer Pinocchio. That's my favorite Disney film. But it's a really, really classic film that everyone needs to see. And if you hadn't seen it, you should have, or you're living under a rock. But overall, I mean, it's just a class. This particular disc is great with a very in-depth special features here. And I really enjoy it. I actually had the newer release, but I sold it because this has tons of things. Like, for example, the original Skeleton Dance Silly Symphony short is on this. And I always did like that, but there's lots of background history, interviews, the classics. One of the things I learned is the mirror, the magic mirror, was very hard to animate the way they did it between some of the techniques and they'd never done it before. So a lot of things that they were creating, like her running through the woods trying to escape the huntsman as he told her to run, and with a 3D feel to it. So just tons of things that had never been attempted before until this film, and it became a huge success. I heard something else here. The famous apple scene, where she eats the apple and becomes poisoned and dies. It wasn't originally an apple, it was a comb. The original story, she had like an enchanted comb brushing her hair, and that had been the poison. And so I thought that was, well, I definitely prefer the apple compared to that, but there were other things that were shot. There's a famous soup scene, which I think those deleted scenes are on this disc, where you can see how they actually went and animated that, so you could see it. It's not finished, but you could see it. Where Snow White teaches them to eat like gentlemen, and I mean, what more can you say about Snow White that hasn't already been said? It's an absolute classic. Roger Ebert had actually given it a 4-star review. It's one of his great movies. But everyone ought to watch it. I mean, at least once. If you don't watch Snow White, you can't enjoy movies like Toy Story without Snow White. You can't enjoy things like Ice Age without Snow White. Everything they owe is to Snow White. Alright guys, well that's all I've got for today. Take care and go watch a movie.